Karen Thompson waddled up, plump in her white blouse, short blonde hair bouncing, green eyes glinting as she stuffed an HOA Karen invite in Sarah's mailbox. $5,000 to join, erase the purple trim, kill the roses. Snapping photos with a smug smirk, she later hissed, "Join, or things get difficult." Sarah's coffee went cold. What's HOA Karen plotting? And how will Sarah, a secret judge, strike back? Stay tuned. Hit like. Let's get 39 for this video and channel. Subscribe now. The morning sun crept over the horizon, brushing the sky with strokes of pink and gold, casting a warm glow on the Victorian house at 247 Maple Street. Its steep gables and hand-carved porch railings stood proud, a century-old relic of elegance. But it was the purple trim, vibrant and defiant, that made it sing. Sarah Martinez sat on her grandmother's porch swing, the wood creaking softly under her weight, a steaming mug of coffee cradled in her hands. At 48, she was a striking woman, medium build, olive skin kissed by years of sun, dark hair pulled into a neat bun. Her sharp brown eyes followed the sunrise, savoring the quiet before her day as a federal judge began. The air carried the sweet scent of her grandmother's heritage roses, their wild blooms spilling over the garden's edge, a riot of red and pink against the house's quirky charm. This was her sanctuary. 3 generations of Martinez's had lived here, her grandmother planting those roses in 1960, her mother hosting summer barbecues on the lawn, Sarah herself studying law under the soft chime of antique wind chimes dangling from the eaves. Every detail. The purple paint Grandma had rolled on with a grin, the roses she'd tended until her hands shook, the chimes that sang lullabies, was a thread in Sarah's story. She'd kept it all pristine, a living museum of love, even as the neighborhood shifted around her. New beige McMansions had sprouted up, their sterile lawns a stark contrast to her untamed beauty, but Sarah didn't mind. She liked her solitude, her history. That solitude shattered when she spotted a figure waddling up the sidewalk. Karen Thompson, her next-door neighbor and self-appointed queen of the block, was a sight to behold. Plump and round, her belly straining against a crisp white blouse tucked into khaki capris, her short blonde hair bouncing like a halo of straw. Late 40s, tan skin glowing from too much sun, she clutched an envelope in her chubby hands, her green eyes glinting with purpose. Sarah's stomach tightened as Karen power-walked to her mailbox, her chunky sneakers thudding on the pavement. With a dramatic flourish, Karen dropped the envelope inside, then pulled out her phone, snapping photos of Sarah's yard. Roses, chimes, purple trim, like a detective on a mission. Her lips curled into a smug smirk, and Sarah knew trouble was brewing. Back inside, Sarah slit the envelope open, the paper crisp against her fingers. Inside was a glossy brochure, beige houses, beige lives, and a letter. Welcome to the Maple Street Homeowners Association. Join us for a $5,000 fee, $350 monthly dues, and a few adjustments. The attached list made her hands tremble. Remove non-approved paint colors. Purple. Replace heritage roses with regulation shrubs. Dismantle antique wind chimes. Sarah's jaw clenched. This wasn't an invitation. It was a demand to erase her home's soul. Through the kitchen window, she watched Karen stride back to her McMansion. Phone pressed her ear. "Yes, I delivered the final invite." Karen's voice floated over, syrupy and sharp. "She'll have to join now. Last holdout on the street. Once her place is in line, property values will soar." Sarah's coffee went cold in her grip. She'd seen Karen at neighborhood meetings, rallying her beige army, her plump frame puffed up with self-importance. But this was personal. That evening, Sarah marched to Karen's door, invitation in hand. The doorbell chimed, "We are the champions." Of course it did. Karen answered, a neighborhood watch captain badge pinned to her blouse, her round face stretching into a fake smile. "I'm declining," Sarah said, voice steady from years on the bench. "This house stays as it is. 3 generations of history." Karen's smile vanished, her chins wobbling as she leaned in. "This isn't optional. The HOA's registered. You're surrounded. Join or things get difficult." Old houses have accidents, you know. Her tone dripped with threat, her eyes narrowing. Sarah met her gaze, unflinching. Is that a threat, Mrs. Thompson? Karen stepped back, smile snapping back like a mask. Just concerned for safety, she purred, but her husband lingered at the window, phone in hand, watching. Sarah turned away, the chimes singing faintly behind her. She didn't know it yet, but Karen had just lit the fuse on a war. One Sarah, with her judge's gavel, would finish. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, a thin mist curling around the Victorian's purple trim like a protective shroud. Sarah stood on her porch, coffee in hand, the swing creaking as she rocked gently. The air was damp, thick with the earthy scent of her grandmother's roses, their petals glistening with dew. She'd barely slept, Karen's veiled threat. Old houses have accidents, echoing in her mind. 20 years as a federal judge had honed her instincts, and they screamed now. This wasn't over. She scanned the street, her sharp brown eyes narrowing as a familiar figure emerged from the fog. Karen Thompson waddled into view, her plump frame squeezed into a bright orange tracksuit, her belly jiggling with each step. Her short blonde hair stuck out in tufts, catching the dim light, and her tan skin glowed with a sheen of sweat. Late 40s, she carried a clipboard, her green eyes glinting with glee as she led a small posse. 3 HOA minions in beige polos, clutching phones and notepads. They stopped at Sarah's fence, Karen's chubby finger jabbing at the roses. "Look at those hideous plants," she declared, her voice shrill enough to pierce the mist. 3 inches over regulation. Unacceptable. Her sidekick, a wiry woman with a pinched face, scribbled furiously, while the others snapped photos of the purple trim and wind chimes. Sarah set her mug down with a clink, her pulse quickening. She stepped off the porch, the damp grass cool under her slippers, and crossed the yard. "You're trespassing," she said, her voice steady judge-like. "This is private property." Karen turned, her round face splitting into a smirk, coffee breath wafting from her lips. "Just documenting violations," she chirped, snapping another photo. "Your grass is 11.5 inches, 3.5 over code. We're helping the neighborhood." She waved her clipboard like a scepter, her belly straining the tracksuit's zipper. Sarah's hands clenched. She knew her rights. Her deed predated their HOA by decades, but she kept her profession close, a hidden ace. "Leave," she said, eyes locked on Karen's. "Now!" Karen's smirk widened, but she waddled off, her posse trailing like obedient ducklings. Sarah watched them go, the chimes tinkling faintly behind her. She thought that might be it, a petty jab easily ignored. She was wrong. The harassment escalated fast. By Tuesday, bright orange warning letters plastered her door, fake violations about unapproved vegetation and non-compliant paint. Wednesday brought landscapers roaring to life at 7 a.m., their mowers buzzing like angry hornets outside her bedroom window. Karen stood in her driveway, sipping coffee from a monogrammed mug, her plump figure dwarfing the mug's dainty size, her green eyes glinting as she watched. Sarah met the noise with calm, showing code enforcement her historic status papers when they arrived on anonymous tips. Each time, they left empty-handed, Karen fuming from her window, her blonde hair bouncing as she stomped inside. Friday night pushed her patience. The HOA's block party blared from Karen's yard. Laughter, music, and Karen's voice booming over a megaphone. "Some properties don't fit our vision anymore." Sarah peeked through her curtains, seeing Karen's mousy husband, Bob, a retired cop with a barrel chest and gray buzz cut, aiming floodlights at her house. The beam stabbed through her windows, turning her office into a stage. Karen, in a garish floral dress, her belly spilling over the waistband, toasted the crowd, oblivious to Sarah's security cameras whirring silently above. Later, reviewing footage, Sarah caught something chilling. 2 HOA board members, Bob and a skinny guy in a polo, skulked near her roses at midnight, chemical sprayers in hand. "Invasive species," Karen's voice purred as she doused the blooms, her plump arms jiggling with effort. Sarah stormed out, phone recording. "Those are heritage roses, not weeds," she snapped. "You're trespassing again." Karen jumped, then grinned, her tan face glowing under the porch light. "Just helping," she lied, spraying more. Bob loomed behind, his work boots caked in mud. "Nobody wants a jungle," he growled. Sarah's blood boiled, but she stayed cool, documenting it all. As she walked back inside, the rose's sweet scent faded under the chemical sting. Karen thought she was winning. She had no idea Sarah was already building a case, one that would burn hotter than any threat she could muster. The dawn broke heavy and humid, the sky a bruised purple that mirrored the trim of Sarah's Victorian. She stood in her garden, barefoot on the dew-soaked grass, staring at the wreckage. Her grandmother's heritage roses, once a cascade of crimson and pink, lay dead, their petals blackened and curled, drooping like mourners at a funeral. The air reeked of chemicals, a sharp, bitter sting that drowned out their sweet perfume. Sarah's chest tightened, her olive skin paling as she traced a withered stem with trembling fingers. Last night's footage burned in her mind. Karen, plump and smug, her short blonde hair glinting under the porch light, dousing the roses with poison while Bob loomed nearby. This wasn't just harassment, it was war. Sarah marched inside, her slippers slapping the hardwood, and pulled up the security feed on her laptop. The high-def camera she'd hidden among the vines had caught it all. Karen's chubby arms pumping the sprayer, her belly jiggling under her designer pajamas, her green eyes gleaming with spite. "Once these are gone, she'll crack," Karen had muttered, her voice tinny through the speakers. Bob, barrel-chested and grim in his gray sweatshirt, had knotted his muddy work boots, leaving prints Sarah could still see in the dirt. She saved the file, her judge's calm steadying her rage. Evidence was her weapon now. By noon, Karen escalated. Sarah watched from her office window as the HOA queen paraded past with a real estate agent, a slick man in a pinstripe suit, pointing at her house. "This eyesore will be dealt with soon," Karen announced, her plump frame stuffed into a blazer, her blonde hair bouncing as she waved a chubby hand. "We have ways of handling difficult residents." Her tanned face glowed with confidence, oblivious to Sarah's cameras whirring above. The agent nodded, scribbling on a tablet, and Sarah's gut twisted. This wasn't about rules, it was about land. That week, the harassment hit fever pitch. Her mailbox toppled overnight, 3 times in 4 days. Orange violation notices fluttering in the wreckage. Code enforcement officers knocked daily, summoned by anonymous tips, only to leave baffled when Sarah showed her historic status papers. Her garbage bins vanished, reappearing in Karen's yard with a smug note. "HOA rules apply." Sarah documented it all, her files growing thick, photos, timestamps, footage. She caught Bob loosening her fence posts one evening, his meaty hands prying at the wood while Karen barked orders, her belly straining her floral dress. "Once these fail inspection, she'll pay thousands or join us," Karen chuckled, her green eyes glinting in the dusk. Sarah's breaking point came Friday night. She was reviewing footage, Karen's minions photographing her electrical box, when a sharp crack split the silence. She bolted to the window, heart pounding. Flames licked the sky, orange and furious, devouring her porch. Smoke billowed, thick and black, choking the air as the purple trim melted into ash. She grabbed her phone, dialing 911, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "My house is on fire, 247 Maple Street. Hurry." 15 minutes later, she stood on the lawn, the heat blasting her face, firefighters shouting over the roar. The Victorian groaned, its beams snapping like breaking bones. Through the chaos, she saw Karen in her driveway, mousy husband at her side, sipping coffee from that damned mug. Her plump figure glowed in designer yoga pants, her short blonde hair catching the firelight, her round face smug as she whispered to Bob. If only she'd joined, Karen purred, loud enough to carry. "Old houses are so unpredictable." Sarah's fists clenched, nails biting her palms. The fire chief approached, his face grim under his helmet. Looks like electrical, ma'am. Old wiring's tricky. But Sarah knew better. Her inspection was clean, just yesterday. She pulled her phone, checking the cameras. Blank. They'd cut out at 3 a.m., 4 hours before the blaze. No accident. As the flames consumed her grandmother's legacy, Sarah's grief hardened into resolve. Karen thought she'd won, smirking over her coffee. She didn't know Sarah's robes hung in her office downtown, or that the judge she'd targeted was already dialing the FBI. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The acrid stench of smoke clung to Sarah's clothes as she stood among the ashes of her Victorian, the morning sun casting harsh light on the charred skeleton of her home. Blackened beams jutted like broken ribs, the purple trim reduced to flakes of ash that swirled in the breeze. Her grandmother's roses were gone, the garden a graveyard of scorched earth. Sarah's olive skin was smudged with soot, her dark hair escaping its bun in wild strands, but her brown eyes burned with a quiet fury. Across the street, Karen Thompson waddled onto her lawn, her plump frame stuffed into a pastel tracksuit, belly bulging beneath the zipper. Her short blonde hair bounced as she waved to neighbors, her tan face beaming with fake sympathy, a coffee mug steaming in her chubby hand. Such a shame, she called, loud enough for Sarah to hear. If only she'd modernized. Sarah bit her tongue, tasting blood, and turned away. She'd watched Karen gloat as the flames roared, oblivious to the phone calls Sarah made in the fire's glow. One to the FBI, one to the state attorney, one to a trusted PI. The judge's robes might be buried in her courthouse office, but her power was here, simmering beneath her grief. She wouldn't reveal it yet. Timing was everything. That afternoon, she sat in a rented apartment downtown, the hum of traffic a faint pulse beyond the window. Her laptop glowed, files spread across the table. Security footage, violation notices, photos of Karen's late-night Rose massacre. She'd salvaged what she could. The camera's backups showed Bob and 2 HOA goons near her electrical box days before the fire, their work boots caked in mud. Another clip caught Karen in her driveway, her plump arms waving as she bragged to a suited man. Once she's out, this lot's ours. Sarah's jaw tightened. This was bigger than a petty HOA feud. She dug deeper. A lunch trip to the county records office revealed a chilling pattern. Every house that refused Karen's HOA in the past 5 years had burned or sold cheap, each snapped up by a shell company tied to Karen's sister-in-law. Sarah's PI, a gruff ex-cop named Ray, called that night. Talked to old neighbors, he rasped, voice crackling through the phone. Same story, harassment, vandalism, then accidents. Most caved, sold for pennies. Karen's crew made millions. Sarah's hands shook as she scribbled notes, the pieces clicking. Karen wasn't just a bully. She was a predator. The next week, Karen's boldness grew. She strutted past the ruins, her belly jiggling in a blazer, blonde hair glinting as she led potential buyers. This mess'll be cleared soon, she crowed, her green eyes flicking to Sarah's silhouette in the apartment window. We got plans. Sarah's cameras, reinstalled discreetly, caught HOA minions photographing her gas lines, whispering about easements. One night, she found a bright orange notice nailed to a charred post. Special HOA assessment, $10,000 to clean your lot. The money, she knew, would line Karen's pockets. Then came the breakthrough. Ray met her at a diner 2 towns over, sliding a USB across the table. From Karen's ex-treasurer, he muttered. She's scared. Says Karen cooked the books, threatened her family. Sarah plugged it in, her breath catching. 5 years of HOA records, cash deposits spiking after each fire, wired to Bob's old police buddies who'd ruled them accidents. A grainy video showed Karen at home, her plump figure hunched over a table with developers, laughing. Next target's easy. Historic junk like Martinez's, she'd said, sipping coffee. Burns fast. Sarah leaned back, the diner's fluorescent buzz fading. The highway expansion map she'd found in city archives sealed it. Her lot was the linchpin for a shopping complex worth millions. Karen's group had bought the surrounding land through shells, but without Sarah's property, their plan collapsed. She smiled, a judge's cold precision settling in. Karen thought she'd broken her, parading her victory. She didn't know Sarah was weaving a net. FBI wires, witness testimonies, financial trails. The smug queen of Maple Street was about to face a reckoning she couldn't bribe her way out of. The community center buzzed under harsh fluorescent lights, folding chairs squeaking as Maple Street residents shifted uneasily. Sarah stood at the back, her olive skin taut with resolve, dark hair pinned tight. 6 months of ashes and evidence had led to this night. She touched the FBI wire beneath her blazer, her brown eyes scanning the room. At the front, Karen Thompson reigned, her plump frame squeezed into a designer suit, belly bulging against the buttons. Her short blonde hair gleamed, her tan face smug as she waved a coffee mug, her green eyes glinting. The property at 247 Maple Street is a nuisance, she boomed, clicking a PowerPoint of Sarah's charred home. We're moving forward with redevelopment. Any objections? Sarah stepped forward, heels clicking on the linoleum. I object, Mrs. Thompson. The room hushed, head swiveling. Karen's smirk flickered, but she recovered, sipping her coffee. Come to admit defeat? Your wreck's an eyesore. We're doing you a favor. Sarah opened her briefcase, spreading photos across the table. Karen spraying roses, Bob at her electrical box, the fire's first sparks. These show you on my property the night it burned. Interesting timing. Karen's chubby hands shook, coffee sloshing. That's anyone, prove it. I can, Sarah said, pulling out bank records, payments to Karen's shell company after each fire, then emails plotting her ouster, texts about accidental blazes. The crowd gasped, whispers rising. Karen's face twisted, her blonde hair bouncing as she sputtered. Ridiculous. I'll sue for defamation. Sarah reached in her briefcase one last time, unfurling her judicial robes. The black silk billowed as she slipped them on. Federal Judge Sarah Martinez, she announced, voice cutting like a gavel. Case 2025, CR 142, United States versus Thompson et al. RICO investigation into corruption, fraud, arson. Karen's mug crashed to the floor, brown liquid pooling around her designer shoes. Her tan skin paled, her mouth gaping. FBI agents burst in, badges flashing, tackling Bob as he lunged for the exit. Sarah picked up Karen's fallen gavel. Meeting adjourned. Handcuffs clicked, and the room erupted in applause. 6 months later, Sarah stood in her reborn garden, the sun warming her face. The Victorian rose again, purple trim gleaming, roses replanted from a surviving cutting, wind chimes singing in the breeze. Karen's trial had been swift. 25 years for her, 15 for her board, their empire unraveled by Sarah's evidence. 15 burned homes, millions stolen, Bob's confession sealing their fate. Her house sold for victim restitution. A new family played there now, free of HOA shadows. Sarah sipped coffee from Karen's old mug, a trophy on her courthouse desk, watching neighbors gather for a block party. Mrs. Johnson, frail and white-haired, hugged her. We should have fought sooner, she whispered, tears in her eyes. Sarah smiled. Justice takes the long road sometimes. The Patel family hosted now, their yard alive with laughter, empanadas shared among rebuilt lives. Karen's coffee sip, as Sarah's home burned, had fueled her. The footage, Karen dousing gasoline, laughing, had stunned the courtroom, her smugness crumbling as victims spoke. Sarah's verdict was steady, her grandmother's memory in every word. Now, the neighborhood thrived. No HOA, just community. The highway plan collapsed without her lot, developers fleeing. She knelt, tending a rosebud, its scent soft and defiant. The purple trim caught the sunrise, a beacon of resilience. Karen thought fire could break her, but Sarah rebuilt, stronger, brighter. Justice hadn't just won, it had bloomed. The sun rose over Sarah's reborn Victorian, purple trim glowing, roses blooming anew. Karen's handcuffs clicked 6 months ago, her smug coffee, sip of fading memory. 25 years in prison, her HOA empire ash like Sarah's old porch. Neighbors danced in the garden, free of threats, their block a community again. Sarah held Karen's mug, a judge's trophy, and smiled. Justice had prevailed. Karen thought power and fire could crush Sarah, but underestimated her fight. Whether it's a home, a memory, or your rights, stand tall. Evidence and grit can topple tyrants. Communities thrive on respect, not control. So, next time someone tries to burn your world down, channel Sarah, document, endure, strike back. Thanks for listening. Share your thoughts below, and let's keep building stories that matter together.